Dumelang, welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, signed, sealed, delivered. That's the government of national unity, not so much the government of the provincial unity in Gauteng. The ANC and the DA have been tussling over positions. The ANC even described the DA as behaving like a spoiled brat. There's now an impasse. The challenge here is that the ANC in Gauteng really can't do whatever it wants. The deal that was signed by the national negotiators of both parties has consequences for Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. So what's next? What's going to end this impasse? The DA federal chairperson Helen Zille is going to speak to us tonight, while the ANC Gauteng meets this evening with its national leaders. Also on the show, President Cyril Ramaphosa has finally announced his cabinet this past Sunday. Ministers are being sworn in tomorrow for the 7th administration. What comes up next is a national dialogue and a cabinet lekgotla for parties to agree on a policy agenda for the next 5 years. But can this GNU last for 5 years? Former minister and businessman Tokyo Sehwale joins us tonight on the show. But first, my comment. So, another deadlock in the ANC-DA negotiations in Gauteng, and we need to pay very close attention to this because it may have implications for an agreement that is signed at national government by the national negotiators. There's a tussle over how many positions the two biggest parties in the GNU are entitled to, and they haven't been able to find each other for over a week now. Remember, Premier Panyaza Lesufi postponed his cabinet announcement last week. He postponed it again this week because of the disagreement over positions. The ANC in Gauteng is meeting tonight with national leaders over this very issue. In fact, Fikile Mbalula, the Secretary General of the ANC, is expected to brief the media tomorrow. The DA has brought in one of its chief negotiators to the province, Helen Zille. Here's how she explained what the ANC has offered them.
It is still wildly out of proportion to give the ANC 6 + 1, the DA 3, which is less than half of what the ANC has got, although we're almost the same size electorally.
So it appears the ANC now wants to give the DA a maximum of 3 MEC positions out of the 10. Helen Zille says the ANC didn't want to tell them being the DA, what it will do with the other MEC positions. And the DA says that's crucial information for them. But it's progress that at least they've negotiated about 3 positions, because Salim Simanga earlier today indicated that the ANC wanted to offer the DA, first it was 1 MEC position, and then they moved to 2 MEC positions. So this means the DA has at least managed to negotiate another position. The problem now seems to be that the ANC wants to keep all remaining 6 or 7 MEC positions and maybe give the IFP or the PA 1 MEC position. And Zille says that would not reflect the will of the voters in Gauteng and would go against clause 16 of the document of intent, which says, and I quote, "The government of national unity shall be constituted in a manner that reflects genuine inclusiveness of political parties that are part of the statement of intent and are represented in the National Assembly, broadly taking into account the number of seats parties have in the National Assembly and the need to advance the national interest. The President shall, in consulting the executive, take into account the electoral outcomes," end quote. So let's look at the electoral outcomes in Gauteng. The ANC received 34%, which gave them about 28 seats. The DA received 27%, which gives them 22 seats. That's a difference of about 6% in the support. Helen Zille says, as the DA, they won't compromise themselves.
We, as the DA, are prepared to enter the government of provincial unity in Gauteng on the basis of a power-sharing partnership to reflect the will of the voters in Gauteng. But we are not prepared to be co-opted by the ANC on their terms alone, acting as if the ANC still has an overall majority in Gauteng, which it does not. We cannot agree to be taken hostage in a government of provincial unity in which only one party dictates the terms.
So the DA is using this now, this proportional representation argument. They used a similar argument, by the way, when they were negotiating for ministers as well, that they must be given ministries proportional to their support or percentage of the votes or seats in the National Assembly. And they don't want to give up ministries to accommodate parties that have since joined the GNU. They're only willing to do that if the ANC also gives up some positions for that purpose. But they lost that battle at national level. Are they willing to lose it again now for the provincial government of unity? That's the question. Here's Lesego Makubela, who speaks on behalf of the ANC in Gauteng, explaining why they can't give the DA what they want.
The Premier of Gauteng and the Speaker of Gauteng were elected unopposed by the parties represented in the Gauteng provincial legislature, not through voting between the African National Congress and the Democratic Alliance. And therefore, that bullying, which seeks to suggest that we should not listen to other parties on the basis of the number of seats that they have, that is the arrogance that the electorate has been telling us about, and we have taken a decision to listen. And at this time, we'd rather err on the side of caution.
So the difference, though, is that as much as Clause 16 somehow helps the DA negotiate to be adequately represented in cabinet, or in this case in the provincial government, it doesn't contain a strict formula that forces the ANC or even at national, the president, to apportion posts according to a specific proportional representation formula. And that's the argument that Ronald Lamola made, the ANC NEC member, when I had him on the show about a week ago, which sort of helps the ANC in a way. So the DA now is saying they're prepared to enter the GNU in Gauteng on the basis of power sharing that reflects the will of the people of Gauteng. They are saying that they won't be co-opted by the ANC on their terms. So they want genuine power sharing. So what must happen now? The ANC's Fikile Mbalula will be briefing the media tomorrow after meeting with Gauteng ANC leaders. Panyaza Lesufi could very well go ahead and announce his cabinet and maybe snub the DA, but that compromises on the agreement that was signed at national level. Yes, he could have the protection perhaps of the EFF and the MK party against any motion of no confidence or frustrations in passing budget, but what consequences would that have at national level? So the question I'm asking you tonight is, seeing what is happening now between the ANC and the DA, they've now reached an impasse on the composition of a government of national unity in Gauteng. Given this deadlock, what do you think should be the way forward? Please send us your WhatsApp voice notes on 078-459-1897. Remember to tell us your name and your surname and where you're sending the voice note from. Please keep those voice notes at 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. Coming up next, conversation with Helen Zille. Welcome back. The DA federal chairperson Helen Zille says they are prepared to enter this government of provincial unity in Gauteng on the basis of a power-sharing partnership which reflects the will of the voters in the province. Zille says the ANC agreed to keep 6 cabinet seats plus the premier and give 1 to the IFP or the PA and 3 to the DA. She says this will be in violation of the proportionality clause of that document of intent. Helen Zille joins us now via Teams. Zille, Helen, thank you so much for making time for us. Welcome to Face the Nation. The ANC doesn't seem to agree with the MEC positions that you want to be given, especially on this aspect of proportionality that I must speak to the support that you've received as the DA in the province. What's going to solve this impasse when you guys clearly don't agree on how the positions must be allocated?
Well, what will solve this impasse is if the ANC understands that they did not win an election. and that they only got 34% in Gauteng, and that it's not what they want that determines the outcome, it's what the voters wanted. That's the most important thing. So in a democracy, you move from the point of departure of what the voters wanted. And the voters gave the ANC 34%, they gave the DA 28%. That is 6 percentage points apart from each other. Now, we cannot be in a situation where an ANC that did not win this election decides how much they will get and how much everybody else will get unilaterally, as if they're in a position to dictate the terms. Mm-hmm. The voters gave us almost the same amount of support, and we need that to be reflected in the government of provincial unity.
Okay.
It's got nothing to do with demanding how many seats and this and that. It's got something to do with reflecting the will of the voters.
Mm-hmm. Haven't you guys come to an understanding still on clause 16 that speaks to proportional representation, and even clause 19 that speaks to sufficient consensus? When I had you and Fikile Mbalula on the show about 2 weeks ago, you disagreed with each other on the interpretation of some of the clauses. I mean, you've had about 2 weeks now to iron out your differences, and yet here we are. You still don't agree on what exactly the wording of clause 16 means, and even clause 19.
Well, the clauses are very clear, and if people want to discuss with us what the exact meaning is, we're very willing to discuss that. Clause 16 has 3 concepts in it. It has proportionality, it has inclusiveness, and it has the will of the voters and the outcome of the election. Those are 3 critical concepts that are contained in clause 16. In clause 19 is the issue of sufficient consensus, which is equally important to the running of the cabinet. So the important thing that we are saying to the ANC is that the election showed us that Gauteng voters want us to share power. And we are prepared to share power in a meaningful agreement in which we are not co-opted merely to prop up the ANC, but in which we have meaningful power and say in a government of provincial unity, and in which we're not merely in office, but also in power reflecting the will of the electorate. Now, obviously, when we are in executive positions, we serve all of the people, but a very significant percentage of Gauteng voters wanted the DA to be in government, and neither of us got an overall majority.
Yeah.
And that is why we have to look at the result. And if you look at the government of national unity parties, as reflected in Gauteng, the DA got 45% and the ANC 55%. Mm-hmm. And the ANC cannot act as if the DA just simply has to have handouts from the ANC in a begging bowl. It doesn't work that way.
You used the same argument when you were negotiating for ministerial positions as well, and you lost that argument because you were moving from 10, 11 posts that you wanted based on this proportionality angle. You are using that now. You didn't get that at national because the president ended up giving you about 6 ministers and 6 deputies. It's possible that you may lose this argument even now in Gauteng. Are you prepared for that? What happens when you do?
Well, we intend to represent our voters, and we intend to be true to the letter and the spirit of an agreement we signed. We believe that agreements are important in the Democratic Alliance. We believe that they are the foundation of workable coalitions and workable governments. And we are not in the position of signing token agreements that actually have no impact later on. So we don't intend to do that. The reason that the National Cabinet was so distorted was that we were not expecting a cabinet of the size of 34 ministers and 34 deputies. That's an enormous cabinet. Now, President Ramaphosa said he was going to reduce the size of the cabinet. So we were assuming a cabinet of 27, 28 maximum. And whenever we asked, we were told it was the president's prerogative.
And so, of course, when the president decided to push up the number of cabinet ministers to 34 and 34 deputy ministers, the proportionality clause was not honoured at all. But in the province, it's a different matter. In the province, there's a maximum of 10 cabinet seats plus a premier. And so we know what the finite number of seats are. And we believe that in a government of national unity, or in a government of provincial unity, in the case of Gauteng, we're entitled to a proportional reflection on the basis of inclusivity. And if other parties are going to be included, which we have no problem with,
okay,
then the ANC must also give up some seats, not merely the DA, to achieve that outcome.
So what happens if you don't see eye to eye, Helen? In your letter to the ANC a week ago, you said the agreement and the negotiations at national level have a consequence on KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. Does that still stand? In other words, if you don't win your fight in Gauteng, does that affect the arrangement at national?
What we said is that if we don't reach an agreement at national level, we won't be pursuing the agreement in Gauteng. That was the position we took. Now, obviously, we are not reckless people. We are not going to say, for example, if the ANC does not honour the agreement in Gauteng, we're going to pull out of KwaZulu-Natal, because we would never subject KwaZulu-Natal to a government of the EFF and MK and the ANC. That would be grossly irresponsible. We got an agreement very easily in KwaZulu-Natal, frankly, because the ANC wasn't the largest party and didn't try to dictate the terms. The IFP is the largest party in KwaZulu-Natal in terms of our government of provincial unity.
Okay.
The IFP was the largest, and the IFP was absolutely fair. The IFP honoured the agreement. They gave the ANC their proportional due, and we sorted that out in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because everyone respected the agreement. When the ANC is in majority, they don't want to respect the agreement.
So are you prepared to be in the opposition benches in Gauteng, is what I'm asking? If you...
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up, Helen, let me ask you about two differences as well that we have seen just this week. You told me earlier this week that as the DA ministers, you are not here to implement ANC policy. And then the ANC's Zuko Godlimpi, who is the acting spokesperson for the ANC, said, all existing policy stands. It remains in text. Parties in the GNU are not here to implement their policies. If they want to repeal policies, they must go through the GNU Political Council. What's the status? Because Dean McPherson also tweeted that he's going to be implementing DA policy in government. My understanding is that as things stand now, the existing policy is what stands until such a time that as parties you have an agreed policy agenda. Is there an understanding on that front? Because you and the ANC are again speaking in different tones.
Well, the truth is that we are not in government to implement ANC policy. We are not going to be hostages to the ANC in government. We are going to share power. We understand that at national level, the ANC got 40% and we got 22%. We understand that and we respect that. And we understand that there are going to have to be a give and take. We won't get everything we like. The ANC won't get everything they like. But we are not there to merely implement ANC policy and to be hostages to the ANC. If that's how the ANC sees us, we'd rather be in opposition.
But you accept, though, that as things stand right now, there is no DA policy in government. What stands now is ANC policy. And as ministers who have been appointed by President Cyril Ramaphosa, all of them are constitutionally obligated to implement what is existing policy until you guys agree on a policy agenda or until you want some policies to be repealed.
Well, we now beginning the 7th administration on the basis of the vote that happened on the 29th of May. That is what stands. And the voters did not give the ANC an overall majority. So on the basis of what the voters wanted, the ANC can't simply impose its policies on us. It cannot simply impose its policies. Now, we're going to have a policy lekgotla, and obviously the ANC is not going to come out with everything they want, and the DA is not going to come out with everything that we want. But this is not a one-way street. I know the ANC is not used to losing elections, but this time the voters have spoken.
Okay.
They have not made the ANC the majority party, and they have to share power, not impose their will on others.
All right. Lastly, you have been critical as the DA of ministerial benefits when you were the main opposition party. Can you assure our viewers this evening that you will be upholding the same standard that you have been imposing on the ANC in government on issues like blue lights, your ministers paying for their own water and electricity, not taking both houses in Cape Town and Pretoria, for instance?
Well, our view has been very well known for a very long time. And that is the DA's approach to things. And I have no reason to believe that our ministers who are currently in government will reject the DA's position on these things. They're there, and Dean McPherson is our Minister in Public Works, and he has got a very particular responsibility in this regard. So I think you need to ask him. I think you need to ask him what his view is on this. The DA's view is consistent and stable on the question of a trimmed down ministerial handbook in which benefits are significantly reduced.
Why can't you be clear, though, to your ministers that this is our position as the DA, you are our deployees in government, and you are not going to enjoy all these benefits we've always been criticizing ANC ministers for enjoying?
Well, we don't use the word deployees in the DA, just like we don't use the term comrades when we speak to each other. That's a kind of democratic centralism, which is another word for totalitarianism approach, and we don't use it. But I have very clear confidence that the DA ministers in government will stick to DA policies and apply them in government.
Helen Zille, DA Federal Executive Chair, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be watching out to see if the DA ministers will be using blue lights, if they will be taking up the houses in Pretoria and in Cape Town, and if they'll be paying for their own water and electricity. After all, that's always been the expectation of the DA, right? On the ANC ministers. They're in government now. Let's see if they will keep the same standard. The question we've been asking you tonight is, looking at what's happening in Gauteng between the ANC and the DA, this impasse now on the composition of the government of the provincial unity in Gauteng, what do you think should be the way forward? Sake says on X, the ANC should be honest with themselves and know that they only have 28 seats and share the rest with other parties. They can't get 7, but it seems like they are not willing to do that and have something to hide. Constitution First says the DA must learn to accept that the ANC is the leader. They know that they have polluted the environment when they labeled everyone doomsday. Now the ANC must bridge the gap between the MK and the EFF and the DA. The DA can't demand as they have too many options. Only the ANC has options. Shoni Libya says they must speedy up the process because they are costing us. The working increase will delay for July. Sean says the DA must put away all the paperwork and work on their person's skills. Our DA spends more time building contracts than they do building relationships. Thank you so much for your tweets that have come through. After the break, we're sitting down with ANC politician and businessman Tokyo Sexwale. Stay with us here on Face the Nation. Welcome back. The swearing in of the new national executive of the Government of National Unity takes place tomorrow in Cape Town. President Cyril Ramaphosa unveiled his cabinet on Sunday, but can this GNU last for 5 years, especially now when ANC and the DA don't even agree on the most basic of things that are in the very same document that both the parties have signed? The former minister and businessman Tokyo Sexwale is facing the nation tonight as we try to figure out the challenges that lie ahead. Mr. Sekgwale, thank you so much for making time for us.
Clement, I'm happy to be here.
You ended your, was it a decade-long political exile when you joined the ANC to campaign in, was it in Katlehong recently?
Well, Clement, I'm a member of the ANC for more than 40 years now. And I've been a member all the time. But when the campaigning came, I was invited to be part of the team of campaigners. Halima Mklantle was there. Thabo Mbeki and a few other, Matthew Posa. So this is my home. I decided to join. I was not ending any drought, but I was just going out there in the streets and playing my role as well.
How do you feel when you see now the ANC with 40%? Do you feel like, oh, our efforts didn't really work?
No. It was a total collective approach, the efforts of all of us. We're not surprised that the numbers came down. Remember, Clement, over the last periods, our numbers have been steadily declining. We're not happy about that. And we reached this point where we realize in the polls, people must believe in these things because a lot of them have got tremendous accuracy. The polls were indicating that we're not going to do that greatly. But I just want to make the following point because I think people are getting it wrong. The ANC did not lose the elections. And people must stop there. We did not lose the election.
Please explain that.
Yes, we lost our ability to govern with that at national level, with that critical 9% to take us to 51. We lost our outright majority, not the elections. You go to in Europe, in different parts of the world, people get their majority at 30%. 33%. See what is going to happen in France right now, Spain, Italy. Nobody says they've lost. You govern with what you have. So we didn't lose the election. We lost the majority. So people should correct that. We are still the supreme party at 40%. Second to us, the
MK party.
The second
the
to us,
Democratic Alliance.
At 22%. We're far from them. Perhaps I want to say something about where we come from. Government of National Unity, Clement.
Before we get there,
Yes.
can I ask you about the winning elections? Because in this country, this is the first time that the ANC loses its majority. Historically in this country, we've never been like the countries you mentioned, Spain and others, that it's become part of their political architecture to have a party that wins 30% and they can still define it as they are the sort of governing or the biggest party. This is the first time in this country where the ANC loses the 50% plus one, which is required for you to be a party in the majority, which is why I think it's correct in this context now, maybe not in the next 5 years, in 2029, when the ANC gets 30% or, I don't know, maybe anything below 40, if really they're going to get anything less than 40%. If we are in that environment, then sure, they wouldn't have lost. But this time around, it's the first time they have lost the 50% plus one, and that's a big loss.
You are putting it correctly. That's what we lost, not the election. Okay, to say we lost the election, we are the superior party, the supreme party in terms of numbers. The second one from us is the DA, 22%. That's what we lost. So I'm just correcting the semantics here. We didn't lose the elections, we lost the requisite majority to govern alone.
All right, let's talk about the government of national unity. I'm sure South Africans will debate amongst themselves around the characterization of what happened in the last elections. The government of national unity. There's so much anxiety in the country now because you've got these two biggest parties in the GNU that have signed a document that, and I don't know if they've taken it to their lawyers and then they came back and said, are we sure about this? Do we really understand what is the letter and the wording of the documents? Because they're so disagreeing on so many clauses, they interpret them differently. What are your thoughts watching the government of national unity, how it's been constituted and its possible longevity?
It's inescapable, Clement, for me to say. We have been down this road before. This is not the first time we have a government of national unity. We did it in 1994, 30 years ago, when we didn't have to. We did that under the leadership of Nelson Mandela, under my leadership here in Gauteng, where they're having problems. I was the leader of government of national unity, and I had members of the National Party. Remember, we did this with people who were beyond the pale. These are racists, members of the National Party. This was de Klerk. This was people who were killing us. But we bent backwards. When we had 92%, there was no compulsion for us to do this. It was when we had 62% and invited out of our own magnanimity, but also out of our sense of national responsibility to bring others. Although we had the majority, the overwhelming governing majority, we decided to invite others. That's where the word unity comes from. It was a government and the national unity. There was no nation. It was divided. Apartheid means apartness. We're breaking apart. There was blood flowing everywhere. So we decided that even though the others had lost the election and we had won at 62%, let us invite them for the sake of unity. And we did that. But guess what? Even though one of them had a Nobel Prize, de Klerk, he walked out of that national unity. What I want to say is that to caution South Africans, and of course to prepare for their future, these governments tend to collapse. No sooner had they been elected or somewhere down the road. Why would that happen? It's not a team. These are people a week ago, 2 weeks ago, were calling one another names, or 5 years, tearing one another apart in parliament. During the campaigning, it was just something else. So it's not like Mapogopogo, Bafana Bafana. These are competitors, combatants. These are people who are at daggers drawn against one another. So they are now trying to come into this thing. It's fine. By the way, it's a good thing. It's a watershed moment. How we handle it, how the leadership manages this thing will tell a lot, because there are going to be 4, maybe 5 differences. One, political differences, Clement. They're going to test this unity government. Number 2, the tests are going to come from policy differences. Number 3, it's going to be budgetary difference. That's a tough one. To argue about budgets, they must be strong. Number 4 is going to be legislation, plus its implementation. And of course, the elephant in the room, the wild jack in the pack, will be personality differences. These can blow the thing up.
Given the personalities you've observed
Yes.
over the last couple of weeks, you've seen the disagreements. I mean, the first time we saw public disagreements from this GNU was on the show when we had Helen Zille who spoke to us, and then had Helen Zille immediately after.
Yes.
When you look at that and how the personalities themselves are handling this, does this have the spirit to continue for much longer, or could we see the collapse early?
That's why we must prepare. Leadership must see ahead. It's not ABC, but it's XYZ. Where will it end? I said we've been down this road before, and the Nationalist Party walked out on us, and we held firm. Now, the personality differences that we are seeing, one would make an appeal, tone down, tone down. Let's tone down, because at the end of the day, these governments are formed out of 2 things. At the lodestar, what we're watching, good faith. Secondly, the national interest. It's about us. After voting, we all folded our arms and we watched the calculations, the arithmetic, who has won. There's no national crisis that was there. The crisis will come when the leadership, all of them, are unable, and they fail to correctly interpret the arithmetic of the numbers. When they play about game umrabaraba with our numbers. We have voted. We're expecting them to understand the differences that is the arithmetics, not even mathematics, is what do you add, who do you work with, and so on. Like I said, good faith, and at the end of the day, the national interest. What's good for South Africa?
What does this mean for just South Africans? Because one of the things I've personally been concerned about is what fundamental changes are we going to see over the next 5 years? I'm mostly concerned about the majority of people in this country, because they're the ones that are poor, they're the ones that are unemployed. You know about just how much of the economy is in the hands of which population groups in this country. We are the country with the highest inequality in the world. When you've got these parties that still have to sit and agree on a policy agenda of sorts, I wonder if there's still going to be space for some radical, effective policies. And I'm not talking about reckless, unconstitutional policies, but radical programs that change the lives of the majority of South Africans. When you look at some of the policies of the other parties like the DA, which is a significant party in the GNU, given the kind of support it holds, they disagree on some of the fundamental policies that the ANC has implemented that have been making some difference, at least on the ground. So are we going to end up with a government here that just wants to get along for the next 5 years because they don't want to argue with each other, but then they miss out on the opportunity to be effective and deliberate even in the transformation agenda?
Well, let's talk about the 4 C's or about the 5 C's. First, we must, and all of them, sitting there, and all of us in South Africa must understand what the nature of this collaboration is about. Is it a coalition? Is it a collusion? Coalition or working together or cooperating? Are we colluding for people to get advantages, positions, rub my side, I rub your back, that type of a thing? Or do they understand it can be a collision eventually? So what type of cooperation, what type of collaboration is this? Once we understand that, it comes now to what we've just raised. What is the primary contradiction? What are the primary issues in South Africa today? The primary issue is poverty. And 80% of the people are like me. The Constitution, and because we're a constitutional democracy, not just a democracy, a constitutional democracy that has got certain proscribed areas, it enjoins us to address the evils of the past. Whoever comes in, whether you are the DA or ANC, the Constitution, unless you change it, you throw it away, enjoins us to address the harm, the pain that happened in the past.
Except the DA leader like Helen Zille has said. Well, in fact, there's some in the DA who have said, well, this is reverse racism. When you talk about redress policies,
it is an
that's
insult.
the position they have, and now they're working with the ANC. So how do you get them to agree on that very aspect of the Constitution when they disagree on how that redress must be handled?
Well, a number of these parties like the DA, they resonate their policies, and I can't blame them with the rich. They resonate with the middle class and so on. But they don't touch our people. They don't touch Langa, Nyanga, Kuguletu. That's where the litmus test is. That's where the SE test is. So inside this government, there's going to be a collision. If people do not agree about the basic tenets, the basic values, the basic achievements, about what the Constitution says about the majority, the overwhelming majority of the people. Remember, we have said South Africa is the most unequal society. Therefore, there's a contradiction in terms of a very unequal society, and yet people who are denying the fact that there are certain things that might be done in terms of legislation, budgets, and so on, to uplift, to push forward this 80%. If you don't do that, we are seeking a danger. And that danger will be national instability, and people will spill out into the streets. So this arithmetic must be handled properly, but also the internal dynamics of the discussions that are going to happen, passing of legislations and so on. It must take into account what is happening outside here. I think it's a watershed moment. I think the president said this is unprecedented. So it's got opportunities, this thing, very good ones, but also negatives. There are threats. The extent to which this leadership, all of them, are not just quarreling about seats, but quarreling about serving people. To that extent, it will determine where we're going.
Look at Triple BEE.
Yes.
Nobody says it's perfect. The ANC itself admits that its implementation has not been the best.
Yes.
So instead of scrapping it completely, rather think around how you strengthen the implementation. The DA doesn't believe in that. They've got their own way of handling Triple BEE, right? You look at the national health insurance, or you look at the national minimum wage. They don't believe in that either. They don't believe that race is a proxy for disadvantage in a country where race was literally a proxy for disadvantage, where it was legislated because of the color of people's skins. My question, I suppose, is the ANC decided we're inviting all the other parties, and this is the party we're willing to sit down with, understanding the implications of getting the DA to compromise on some of its policies and the ANC possibly compromising on some of its policies. Do you think it was a good idea for the ANC to choose? Because it could have chosen EFF with other parties, because the EFF doesn't want to work with the DA, but they chose, okay, we'll take the DA because we're inviting everybody else. But they had a choice. But they may have to pay the price for that choice when they want to implement certain things, but they can't because they don't have sufficient support in the GNU? What do you think?
There'll be a price to pay for your actions. But let's talk about the choices they made. The ANC did not enter into a relationship with one party. The door was open. That's why 11 of these parties came in. Of course, the DA has got 20%. It's bigger than all of them. Now, then the DA should not pretend that because we've got 20% and others got less than that, therefore we are the big bully, in the big cow. So the ANC is still the biggest. Clement, the ANC had a choice to reach out to the EFF. It had the choice to reach out to
MK Party. And to be fair, they did.
Yeah,
they invited everybody.
That's right. Of course, they took their position and they said that's opening up a situation where the ANC is now forced or compelled or destined to work with the other parties. So that's what happened. Others joined, others stayed outside. Well, others decided to be, what do you call it, the progressive
caucus.
Caucus.
Well, it's been dismantled now because it started with what, 10, 11 or so, or 7 members. I don't remember. Many of them have now joined the GNU.
So you're going to be seeing this shifting sands throughout.
Okay.
So choices have been made, and I'm saying the extent to which the leadership of these parties handle these contradictions inside these parties is going to determine how long such a coalition
But do you
lasts.
think this was the best choice to take the D as opposed to say, you know
Not
what?
Not necessarily the best. But it is what you're working with. They have this 20%, but it's not the best choice.
What will be the implications of this choice that wasn't the best for the ANC?
The implication is that because we represent different sectors in society, different classes, different emphasis as to how you address the needs of those classes, somewhere along the way there's going to be a reaction, because others are more emphasizing the middle class and others are emphasizing the working people in their generality, particularly who are black, and majority of them who are African. We are in the situation in which we are, and leadership must rise to the challenge of handling the contradictions and the differences which are going to come within this. And otherwise, like I said, these things tend to fail.
Could this destroy the ANC?
Any party is destined to be destroyed by what happens. I'll tell you why. When all ministers are inside, when it's honky-dory, everybody has been appointed, you're in cabinet, blah, 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 they're sworn in tomorrow. There will be ructions within your party about the way you conduct yourself inside there. So these parties are all subject to criticisms, to scrutiny by those who have left outside, who feel, this leader, especially the small parties, they're in danger, because they will also, this leader is now having a snout in the trough, he's got a car, he's got all sorts of things, and he's not emphasizing our policies properly, he's been pulled with the nose by other parties. There's going to be ructions. Inside the ANC, do the same, where people are saying, where's the emphasis on this or that? So there's a danger for everybody. And the more they hold on and they're firm to their principles, the more there's going to be what I call now the coalition. But in any case, we are South Africans. You know what, Len? I see what's happening in Gauteng and so on. I would urge them, go back to the negotiating table, all of them. Especially here, I used to be the premier here. This is the heartbeat of South Africa. This is the heartbeat of the economy. This is where social life, everything about South Africa is here. Gauteng is the centerpiece of South Africa. I would say to them, go back. The alternative, as they say, is too ghastly. Because if the politicians or the leaders fail to manage these numbers, the people who are sitting out there, they failed. They're going to go out in the streets. Voices, T-shirts, flags, protest stones, you're stoking the fires. So we must understand where we are. It's a very dicey moment. People have shown confidence in us, but if you fail to interpret this arithmetic, you're actually opening a But I want to say, all of us, we're in the same boat. And we swim or sink together. So if I say, on your side of the boat, there's a whole water is coming in and I laugh at you, that water is coming to engulf.
Is it too late for the ANC to change their choice?
We've decided to go along this route. It's a precarious route. It's not what the ANC wanted. The ANC wanted an outright majority. Now, suddenly, within a few days, we are told that you don't have that majority. We are looking at the screen, oh my God. So it's not something that you planned.
Yeah. Speaking of oh my God,
yes.
There are different stages of grief. What stage of grief are you at as the ANC? Because even Helen Zille indicated earlier that it looks like you have not accepted as the ANC that you have won with the outright majority.
Without.
Without, sorry,
Yes.
that you have not won. With
We have won without an outright
you've won
majority,
without the,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
In your characterization.
Yes.
Do you think the ANC, you guys have gone through the stages of grief, or are you still on the first one, which is denial?
I don't know. Well, I think there is acceptance right now. But let me
Is
tell
it?
you, yeah, there is acceptance. But we're shocked. Huh? You want to know the shock? Not even I. And I thought the majority of us did not expect that the MK would do so well. 14% nationally, elbowing the third party, which was EFF. And of course, in KZN, 45%. That was a shock. So yeah, we're grieving about that. But this is no moment for leaders to grieve. It's funereal for a short period. But we're going to stand up, look at the policies, look at the strategies, how you fix this thing up, how to work with others. And I said, in good faith, in the national interest. What about the people? If you miss that one, they are going to go into the streets. And in this country, you know what is going to happen.
Yeah.
I can assure you, if we get it wrong, these numbers are not held properly, the people will spill out in the streets, and they will find their own ways of solving this problem. We better check up our act here.
One of the things some South Africans have been watching very closely are the markets and how they react. From the time when we were going to the polls, after the results were announced, during the negotiations for the GNU,
Yes.
the rand strengthens here when there's a particular narrative, and then the rand weakens a bit when there's another narrative. What are your thoughts on how the markets have been reacting to the conversations and the developments in the country over the last couple of weeks?
I was impressed with an analysis which was made by former public protector.
Thuli Madonsela?
Yes, on the markets, you know. I was actually surprised that she's saying that. The markets, we, business, are the markets. You are looking at the markets now. What are the three things that influences things here on the market? What are we doing in business? Finance, trading of goods and services, as well as investments. On investments, the markets don't shake very heavily. Coca-Cola doesn't walk out of South Africa, or BMW, or whoever's manufacturing huge things, they're manufacturing in mines and so on. They don't shift immediately. So it's more or less quiet on that front. They are looking. The second area is that of trading, selling of goods, apples, wines, things that we manufacture here. They get affected by the markets because people have made orders, or you have made orders to buy from somewhere or to sell. So those markets need to be watched, but they don't shake things very much. The markets, when we talk about the markets, we say things are shaking, is in the financial area, financial institutions, where people are playing with money because it comes and goes. And it affects the basic commodity that you have here, which is your own currency. So they put in your currency into the play, they drop your currency, they do all sorts of things. And the graphs keep on doing that. These are the sentiments that we watch all the time. That's why you want a very suave Minister of Finance to watch these things, because your Minister of Finance is more of the Minister of International Affairs, especially for a country like South Africa, which is exposed to the G7 countries, which are primary trading partners. So your finance minister must be out there with a team to calm these people who are throwing monies on. They work on computers every day. And billion years, take 500 billion, that type of a thing. That's where the shake-up is. You also need, of course, Lesitja Khanyago, quietly there behind the scenes protecting the rand, because his job is the protection of money, what you call price management. So they play there. There's no playing, there's no insulting things and coming up with strange. So the markets more or less reflect those types of currency movements. Financial markets work in that area.
Should they be influencing decisions that are taken in a sovereign country where the electorate has made that decision?
They often do. You know how they do that? That's the conspiracies of the market sometimes.
Because they want what's best for them.
Yeah, they drop your currency, and then you're in trouble. You start to shake, and so what is going to, but that also influences the other part of the markets, which is trading, okay, and then the investments. Because the investors, if some people are sitting in a room planning to expand their investment in South Africa, and they hear the gyrations caused by the financial markets, they slow down. So, but in any case, you need to manage those things. But this is wrong. For some of the things which are being done by people out there, calling themselves the markets, But in any case, we live in a world where we are very, very exposed to these people. Take Russia. Russia is getting itself out of this thing so that they are not exposed. That's why the economy is going, despite all the sanctions, is going far. I think they're at 5%. They're going even higher than the many averages in the world. With us here, we can't play with this thing. We're traditional trading partners. France, Germany, Britain, United States, Italy, Canada, Japan, Australia, and so on. These are the countries we are trading with. So we better be very, very careful. We can't play about as though we control everything. So, but what is wrong is for people behind the scenes to be shot in the rand, to do all sorts of things.
I mean, what you see in the headlines sometimes is the rand strengthens as the DA seems to be signing a deal with the ANC.
Yes.
Rand weakens as the ANC considers to work with the EFF. I mean, what is that?
The games that people play there. But in any case, all I'm saying is that will happen. You can't stop that. You just have to learn to be managing these things, communicating with them, and to try to keep the nation safe.
Yeah. Just as we wrap up, the last time I actually saw you on television was when you were talking about the Heritage Fund. Did you guys ever resolve that? The Reserve Bank came back and said you were scammed. Was there ever finality on that?
There is finality. It was handled by the Hawks. They did the investigations.
Okay.
Maybe you can ask Libya about that because they reported on that matter.
Okay.
I was just appointed, and where I saw things going wrong, I reported. It stayed with the police. I'm not an investigator, but I told them what I saw.
You didn't lose any money based on that?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Tokyo Sokhale, thank you so much for coming to Face the Nation with us tonight. I appreciate your time.
My Yantela. I thought you were going to Yantela.
Yeah.
But you do very good.
Thank you for making time for us. All right. We've been asking you the question tonight about what's happening in Gauteng between the ANC and the DA when it comes to the composition of the government on provincial unity in Gauteng. Given this deadlock, what do you think should be the way forward? Let's look at some tweets that have come through. We've got Lingode who says there is no outright majority winner. The ANC is at 35% with the DA seats, with 28 seats, and the DA is at 28% with 22 seats, meaning there is no big boss. According to the voice of the people of Gauteng, they need to sit around the table and find common ground. Stop playing with the lives of the people who voted. Zoletu says the DA is trying to bully the ANC in Gauteng when they failed in getting what they wanted in the GNU and only received a mere 6 ministers out of 32 ministers. That statement of intent must be disregarded as it was not even implemented and did not find expression in the GNU. Just Show Love says they should just share power. After all, that's what we, the voters, want. They had full power and didn't deliver. They can't want to move as if everything is normal and they have 50% plus one. They should feel it. They can want all the power. All right, so those are the tweets that have come through. We've also received some of your WhatsApp voice notes responding to this question about what's happening in Gauteng. Helen Zille says, well, we just want to make sure that we get positions that are proportionate to the support that the DA received in Gauteng. So here's what you've had to say on the WhatsApp voice notes.
Good evening, Clement. This is Makumbi Kachero from Limpopo, Chakuma. I just wanted to say that the ANC should go ahead and work with the EFF and the MK and leave out the DA, because as they said that the DA is behaving like a spoiled brat. So there is no any other way. I don't think they will reach consensus. They must just move on, and then the DA should just become the official opposition. Thanks.
Good evening, Clement. This is Ntobeko Kubone in Umchwalume. I think ANC should just forget about the DA and look at other parties like the EFF and the PA. For sure, they'll be able to form a government. Because if they do that, the DA will go and become the opposition, and then that will not affect the other province like KZN or even the national. Thank you.
This shows exactly that these two parties that are concerned about their position, they're not concerned about the people on the ground. They must just swallow their pride and work together.
Good evening, Clement. This is Bongani from Mdeni. With regard to Gauteng, I think the ANC should take out of 11, already they have taken 1. They just have to take 3. The DA takes 3. And then the remaining should be distributed to the other parties who are participating in this government of national unity, of a provincial unity. That is all. And then we continue. That's it.
All right, thank you so much for all your WhatsApp voice notes and your tweets and your continuous engagement on Face the Nation. That's how we wrap up the Tuesday edition of the show. We'll be back on Thursday at exactly 8 p.m. See you then. Have a good evening. Cheers.